Hello, everybody. Let's have a look at you. Hi there. Hi. You
Good
familiar?
morning.
Good
Hi,
morning. Hello, everybody.
I
Oh, yeah.
hi everybody.
Oh, super. Great stuff. So you all arrived together.
had to come early this time around because I was not allowed to get in the last time. So
Yeah, we changed that. There was a limit of 100 apparently, and we went over it last time. So we've now increased that limit, so we can have, I think, some up to 250. I think it is now. So I don't think we'll be having 250, but it's nice to be popular. This is our resolution roundtable. It's our occasional opportunity for you to bring along case material, talk about mediation cases you're working on, and have a discussion, share with your peers, maybe get a comment or two off me, and learn from practice. So I'm Mike Talbot, Dr. Mike Talbot. I'm the founder and CEO of UK Mediation and EU Mediation, our sister company in the European Union. I'm a psychotherapist by trade. Please don't be put off. What that means is we're interested in the psychology of conflict. The way that we work, for those who are unfamiliar, is we are interested in why it's so difficult to navigate our way through conflict, why it affects us in such a way, such an adverse way, and what we need from an impartial third party to be able to resolve conflict. So we are mediators. It's everything we do. It's all we do. We train mediators and we do mediation. So we have a lot of people out there we've trained who do cases and often would like to benefit from some consultative support. I think the popularity of these events tells us that there is a need for this. There is a need for people to have somewhere to take case materials, experiences of putting their training into practice, have a bit of reflection on their practice, learn from what they do that works well and sometimes it doesn't work quite so well, and be able to apply theory to practice and practice to theory. So this is what we're here to do. So as we begin, just a couple of things about boundaries with this. It's clearly a public forum. It's being recorded, so we can put it on the website. It's very, very important that when I ask you to talk about cases, please don't say anything that would identify the people you worked with or the organization that they come from. So we say party one did this, party two did that. And just try not to, it's sometimes difficult. You've got to keep a check on yourself, but try not to mention that one was a bus driver or one was the two of them worked in a government institution in Berkshire. They'd be very, very careful not to identify. Imagine that the parties themselves were watching. We want it not to be identifiable. They shouldn't be able to deduce that it's they you are talking about. So be very, very careful with that, please. Not to identify cases. So in a minute, I'm going to ask somebody to put their hand up and tell us about a case they'd like to bring here today. It's all about your material. It's not a lecture. So I'm going to ask you to think of a case that's either at your door, you're just about to take it on. You've begun it. Maybe you've done the individual meetings and thinking about the joint session. Maybe you've concluded it, so that you've taken it through to either an agreement or the point where no agreement's possible. Or maybe it's something in the past that's sort of still in your mind that you'd like to sort of revive, talk about, have a think about. The point is for others to hear about your work, how you do it, for you to ask any questions, and most importantly, to bring out some learning points from your practice, other people's practice, maybe even my practice. I've been doing this a long time, got the grey hairs to prove it. Okay, so we have a hand. Catherine, hiya. You're the first contributor. Let's hear what you'd like to bring here today.
Um, you can hear me, Mike. Yeah. No, I was actually, I jumped on there, and then I have a case, and they're a couple now. They didn't get married, but they had a baby. They had a relationship, and they ended up having a baby. They're still in the same house, but he is like trying to mediate it. He's always avoiding, resolution or even, coming together and discussing, and there's high conflict all along. The baby is now 6 months old, was doing very well. But I'm just wondering, when you have a situation like that, now I find myself, I'm getting much more, directive, as in, okay, we need to meet. She has actually contacted the solicitor. The solicitor's recommended her to just keep going with the mediation and see can she kind of, but it's been a long journey. And now again, we're trying to organize a meeting and it's avoiding again, So I'm just wondering as a professional, because I'm not that long doing the mediation, but how much boundaries I find myself now getting very kind of, well, we're going to meet. I'm kind of almost like directing him now. So I'm just kind of wondering from your experience, I'm sure you've met plenty of avoiders.
I sure have. I'll say a few things, but then I'll throw it open to people here
Yeah.
to see if anybody's had a similar experience or if they've got some additional insights. So I'll ask you a couple of questions first, Catherine. What's the objective of the mediation? What are they trying to achieve?
Well, they're a parent and they have a 6-month-old now, so they have to co-parent this child, and they want to. They're living in Ireland. They're not from Ireland, family or somewhere else. Now, so she's very much coming from a culture where she's very much the mother and very looking after. He is coming from a culture where it's kind of much more the men just do the providing. But he is, what would I say? He still wants to be part of I can't say family because they are sharing an apartment, but they actually probably ultimately won't be living together, I think, long term. I don't know. So the goal really is to it was to kind of work out the finances, and it was also now to work out communication, because the communication is, as I say, really difficult. And also the goal is then to sort out, we're at a stage now about parenting, how much involvement does he have? Will he, how is he going to do that? And all of these, every issue is an avoidance issue for him, but he still controls the situation because she doesn't have the money.
Yeah. We know that mediation is voluntary. We can't force people to take part. We can't force people to make any agreements, even attend or participate. They have to want to do it. So the objectives have to be objectives that he wants to achieve. And if the objective is, as you imply, how we can reduce the tension in how we communicate, how we can get a better deal about how we co-parent, how we manage finances. If he wants to sort those things, he'll participate in the mediation. But if he's happy with the status quo or doesn't see the point of changing what they do, then he's going to be disinclined to take part, I guess. It's not a
Yeah,
particular.
he actually, she got a solicitor and then she said, okay, she will take it. And then he's kind of coming a little bit. He's agreed on maintenance of something for the child, but it's all the time, it's like pulling teeth. So it's like from my kind of thinking, I feel I need to now just I need to take a more, how would I say, to take more control of the situation.
Hmm. What's your role with in what capacity have you gone in there as a mediator, Catherine?
In what do you mean now?
Do
Oh,
you work for an agency, for a
no,
service?
I just work privately.
Okay, no,
Yeah,
sure thing. I mean, there might be a point where you've got to say to people in this and in other cases, I can't help you. If you're not that minded
operating, yeah.
or that motivated to solve this, then there's nothing I can do really. They have to want to solve it. And what we do is we catalyze that conversation. We just make that conversation happen. But if they don't have the inclination or a good reason to want to solve it, sounds like he feels like he's got more reason now. He's got a legal professional pushing it along. Perhaps he would like to avoid it going to court where he might come off worse. But if he doesn't have the inclination, then you can't help.
Yeah, it's just the avoidance is no, he will say he is wanting to do it, but it's like a manipulation all the time. So
Yeah. Yeah. So
um
you work together with them in a joint meeting, yeah?
well, what I do is on Zoom actually, because I'm not close to them. So we both live about an hour away. So I work on Zoom.
Yeah.
And like she's very cooperative, of course, but yeah,
Mm,
it's the
yeah.
avoidance that's the big thing.
Yeah.
He's
Of course, yeah. Yeah,
you know
for sure. There's
I
a
don't
lot
know,
of,
I thought I'd throw it out there anyway.
no, it's a great one to bring because quite often we're dealing with reluctance or avoidance or a lack of participation. Edward, you got your hand up. Sorry to leave you so long.
Oh, just a question about the what you're saying, avoidance. It appears to be that's what the one partner is saying. And the other, the other partner might not be saying that. So I'm just wondering, when you have maybe an individual meeting with the other partner, the man, um, what happens then? Because that seems to be something I haven't quite heard from what you're saying.
Yeah, and that's what I'm trying to organize right now. That's why it's kind of jumped out, because I'm trying to organize that. I actually met them before the baby was born, and I didn't want to put too much kind of, just because that had to be dealt with the birth and then, all that process. And now we're kind of at a stage. I hadn't met them for a few months, and now they're at a stage where it's about, how are we going to co-parent? How are we going to sort the finances out? They've decided they're going to stay in the same apartment because, for the moment, because of just accommodation here in Ireland is difficult.
Mm.
So I'm now trying to get a meeting with him. I've spoken to her separately in the caucus meeting, and now I'm trying to do it with him to go through a lot of stuff. He will send me an email with a whole lot of stuff, that he wants included in the agreement, but we need to discuss it,
Yeah.
and so he needs to make time. So that's kind of the next phase. But I kind of find that, it's anyway, it probably will happen anyway, but I'm just wondering, I didn't want it to take so much time, maybe when I'm more
Yeah.
experienced, it'll be less difficult.
It's I think I can hear your frustration, Catherine. You're a bit like, "Oh, we'll just come along and we can get something sorted." But yeah, I think those situations are particularly difficult to deal with when you've got one who's more cooperative and the other one's a bit more resistant. But there's a paradox. The harder we push people or try and
Yeah,
persuade or cajole them to come into mediation, quite often the harder they'll push back.
yeah, yeah,
Don't push.
yeah, yeah.
And say, if you want this, it's here. If you want this service, it is available. I'm very happy to provide it, as long as we can pin down some clear objectives about what it is both of you want to achieve, not what you insist you agree, but what it is do you want to achieve, like harmony in the apartment, or the best situation for the child, or less shouting, or whatever the thing is they want to achieve. They need to be very clear about it, and you can't define that for them. And neither can you frog march them into mediation. And I would say, if you're not, prepared to put your shoulder behind this, I can't help you. You need to have a lot of inclination to want to do this. Go on. Yeah, that's fair enough. So Nadine's saying it's them not participating is not you failing.
Well, can I just say one thing? You see, I would be very relaxed about things generally, but sometimes it's kind of the mediator. I would be very, give them space. But now
Yeah.
I feel in this case is okay. Just let's, I need to take more charge. I guess that's what I sense.
I would challenge them less, and well, apart from to say, unless you really invest in this, then I can't help you.
Okay.
Tracy, let's hear from you, please.
It's on the same subject, but I'm a workplace mediator.
Oh, you went mute. That's it. Yep.
Am I okay now? Yeah. So workplace mediator, and I think this that you've just been talking about is one of my biggest challenges, really. The avoider, who is quite difficult as a mediator, thinking, I sort of know that if you engaged in this, it would probably be a good thing to do. But obviously that's being judgmental. And the reason I put my hand up was because I'm a workplace coach as well, I find it a bit tricky. I feel it as if I was a pure mediator, I could probably deal with it better. I don't know if it's better or worse, but what I do is I start going into a coaching mode. So I have a conversation with them and I tell them, I don't say I'm coaching, but I start to say, what's the alternative if you don't go forward with this, and they usually come to the conclusion themselves that actually they've got no alternative, or when they come up with a list of what they want to get out of it, how are you ever going to get that if you don't participate in this? So I'll probably start asking them some coaching questions like that and then just leave it with them. And then in a workplace, it sort of goes all around the houses through all sorts of things like grievances and disciplinaries and God knows what. And then I find that it comes back to me months later. Some have come back 2 years later, where they've been through all the rigmarole of all the difficult conversations and grievances and everything, and they've still not sorted it out because they've still not sat in a room together and actually, approached each other. So I've not probably got the answer, but I suppose it is about getting them to decide what the alternative route would be. And actually, they'll normally come to the conclusion that there's absolutely nothing else they can do other than mediation to sort this out.
Okay. It's a mediation question as well. What's the alternative? And we talk about BATNA, the best alternative to a negotiated agreement, BATNA, which is a thing in mediation. So, yeah, what we can do, I'm just keeping in mind the previous contributor as well. So Catherine's saying about, maybe I need to challenge more or to be more insistent. I think in a way, be less insistent and say to people, have you thought about what the alternatives are to doing this, and bring them into your trust, as I'm sure you do, Tracy, so that they will at least step over the threshold into the mediation room and have an individual meeting. It's what we say with cases here, because we get a lot of referrals, and we say, well, we're not going to try and persuade you into it, but if we can get you as far as turning up for the individual meeting with the mediator, they will probably go ahead once you get them there. Is that your experience as well, Tracy?
Absolutely. And I think what I try to do is build trust in me that I am really there to support them. And obviously, I'm really there to support the other person, but I'm there to do it equally with both. And they, once I've met with them, if they ever get to the first meeting with me, they will definitely go away with a sense that they can trust me to do whatever I can do within my power to help them. And I think that makes them turn up for the next meeting.
It's lovely. I love that formal words. It's really good. Yeah. And I say to people, I can't make any change happen. I can just set the conditions under which we can experiment and see whether change will happen when you two have a good conversation. People go, what? Well, what are you going to do? And I say, well, I'll show you rather than tell you. So let's see if we can get you in a room and help you have a chat. That's it. There's the science of mediation. Get you in a room and help you to have a chat. So, I try and keep things really, really simple, Tracy, but I love the way you put it there as well. Yeah. So we can't make anything happen. We can't make people attend. We can't make them agree. We can't sometimes make them have dialogue, which is Catherine's experience. And Linda's reinforcing that point on the chat that, the dad needs to agree to it for any change to begin. And it's absolutely true. They both need to agree to it. But getting them in the room by helping them weigh up the alternatives. The other thing with your situation, Tracy, which is very familiar to us, is that there's been a trend over recent years for people to go down the investigation route or grievance route, and then as a conclusion of the investigation, they say there's nothing upheld, or there might be one or two things that have been upheld in the investigation, but we recommend that they go to mediation. Now, you've maybe spoken to them here. They've gone through all of that you describe, all the painful evidential win-lose processes. And then at the end of that, they say, oh, yeah, now we recommend you try mediation. So you come back here, but now they're at loggerheads. Now they're set against each other. Now they've heard things from the other party that are very accusatory, very persecutory. Now they've drawn in witnesses and they've produced the email trail and all of this. So they're rather more adversarial now than they were if you'd have got them first. So it's just a fact of life, but it's an unfortunate thing when mediation is recommended after all the very adversarial processes. You're starting the process with a much more difficult atmosphere. Yeah. Okay, Kate, let's hear from you, please. Hi, Kate.
Hi, thank you for taking my question. So
just a second, Kate.
briefly
Just a second.
before Mike,
Just a second, Kate.
to the webinar,
You're all broken up. I think it's your end by the look of it.
Am I still there?
Yeah, you're all broken up and moving very slowly. But are you?
I'll type my question instead.
Hang on, we've got you now. I think it's the internet gremlins may have come on your side now. Let's talk it again.
Okay. Right, thank you. Yes, so I'm fairly new to mediation. I'm now on my sixth case, but so far so good. But I've had a couple of occasions so far when I've gone back to the parties, 6 weeks later or whatever, to check in with them, that they've wanted more support from me than I perhaps was expecting to need to give. And what's the more experienced mediators do in that situation? And what would you advise?
Excellent. So what is it they want after the 6 weeks, Kate? Because we normally, just for everybody else as well, we'd
Yeah.
normally conclude the mediation. If they get an agreement, we'll say, okay, take your agreement away, try and do it, try and put it in place. We'll copy a summary to the referrer so that they know and can support the parties to do what's in their agreement. 6 weeks later, we check in and say, how's it going? Did it work? So what are they asking you for at that point, Kate?
This has been a couple with so a manager and a direct report, and the manager has obviously felt it's quite hard to manage the member of staff, and we've been through the reasons why during the mediation, and they've come to agreement on what needs to happen. But I think it's a bit about the manager having the confidence to actually go away and do it. And I'm obviously an independent, I'm not employed there. They probably need a bit of coaching or support themselves, but that's not really my position. I mean, I could help them. I have done that before in my HR career, but that's outside of the remit of this particular situation.
There's nothing wrong with doing some conflict coaching afterwards. If people are finding it hard to implement their agreement, if they say every time I get in the room with him or her, I find it hard to do the things we've agreed to do, or I find it hard to be assertive, or I feel like I'm, being too bossy, or whatever it is, might benefit from some conflict coaching. If you offer it equally to both parties, if you're just a one-woman band and you're, working independently, offer it equally to both parties. Clearly, if you're charging them on a day rate, they'll have to pay you some money. But it might be a really good way to get them past because it can feel like quite a big transition going from being at loggerheads with somebody for a long, long, long time. Then you get an agreement, and then you've got to be collaborative with them on the basis of this agreement. It can feel like a mountain to climb for some people. Other people, they walk out the mediation room chatting with the other party. They forget to look behind and say thanks to the mediator, and they're off.
Yeah.
New relationship, everything's cool. But
Yeah.
other times it can feel like a bit of a challenge. So conflict coaching,
Okay.
which is about developing their interactional skills, their skills in putting the agreement into place, assertiveness, coming back to you with situations in between conflict coaching sessions where they say, yeah, I tried to have this conversation and this happened and I did this and I felt that, debriefing those, dealing with those, developing their skills. And if you do that, if you offer it equally to both parties, like I say, then it doesn't compromise your impartiality.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what they're after. Okay, thank you. I'll consider how I can offer that.
Good. Okay, let's go to Claire, please.
Hello. I wanted to offer something about the first case. Is that still okay? Yeah. Thank you. So I'm coming from a background of being a domestic abuse specialist, working with the perpetrators, helping them to end their harmful behavior. So I guess it's one thing we would always say in those situations is that joint counselling and joint mediation is never appropriate because it's a power imbalance. And so I'm just picking up through this the dimension of a sort of potentially cultural entitlement to power. So the power dynamics. And so in this case, if the male has the money, that's immense power in this situation. And then as I hear it described, the male in the situation is only stepping forward if somebody absolutely pushes and begins to give a boundary. So these are all manipulative behaviors, potentially could be labeled as coercive control. So I think in a way, a beautiful outcome would be to really say, look, you haven't come to the meetings. I've set them 3 times. So that's it. Thanks very much. And that gives a clear message to the female in the partnership. It's not happening. Look after yourself, go down the legal route and get that money for yourself, So I hope that's not too heavy to bring. But I would be, in my own mediation role here, will always be watching out for the power imbalance of domestic abuse because it's an epidemic,
Brilliant. Brilliant. No, really, really valuable. Thanks very much, Claire. I hope Catherine's still on and would have heard that. And yeah, it comes back to the voluntariness. And what I would say is to give up power is to make yourself vulnerable. To negotiate an agreement, be it in a domestic setting, a workplace setting, a commercial setting, a neighbour setting, requires that you demonstrate some vulnerability. And I think, as you say, if somebody is controlling, either by virtue of having the financial control or coercive behaviour, or is physically controlling and psychologically controlling, without giving that up or giving up a large part of that, there's not going to be a negotiated settlement between the two parties. What it will be is a transactional and often manipulative process, which leaves that person in control. So they need to give up that control to come into mediation so that we are happy they're both there voluntarily, they're both there with the intention of negotiating a resolution to their dispute or preventing the worsening of their dispute, and that they're both there on an understanding that this requires an openness and honesty, which is actually contradictory to somebody holding all the power and using it oppressively. So absolutely, and I don't need to tell you, safety first in those situations, and particularly in DV settings. We cannot mediate around a situation where somebody is being controlled by physical abuse. So we've got to be very, very careful and put safety first. But you need to have the vulnerability that comes with giving up control before coming over the threshold into mediation, because it's the only way it's going to work. Brilliant. So Nadine says the party in that case, in Catherine's case, has something to lose, which is not living with their child anymore. Okay, great. And the other thing they have to use, which is just alluded to there as well, is about, if they only react when they're being pushed, like there's going to be a negative consequence of going to court, for example, and perhaps losing some of this money and thereby some of this control. If that's the only time they're prepared to walk towards mediation, then perhaps we're onto a loser. And I agree, it's not the outcome we would crave, but it's a good conclusion to the attempts to do mediation, is to say, we've tried all these times, I've given you all the encouragement and information that you could possibly want, and the conclusion is that you're not prepared to take part. Done. See ya. Can't help you. And I don't find that harsh at all. I think it's actually a good outcome. Let's hear from somebody else. Who else has got a case, a question, something big or small? No problem too small or too big. The resolution roundtable. Anything you'd like to chip in? A case you're working on or thinking of working on? Today seems to be a bit of a theme about resistance or reluctance to participate, control, power imbalances, those kinds of things. If that brings up anything for anybody, we need to hear from you. If we don't have material, we haven't got much of a roundtable going on. I don't talk about my cases here or our cases of my panel. So it's all about you bringing your own material. And we have that from Anthony. Hiya.
Hey, Mike, how are you?
Good, thanks. Yeah.
Good. Unmute. There we go. I just mentioned this because you didn't, I haven't started this case yet, but it's come in, and so I thought it's interesting. It's a textbook role play case, funnily enough, but this lady called me up, and she and her brother. So that's always the interesting thing here. She and her brother started a company. It's a trucking company. What do we call that over here?
Try not too many details, Anthony, please.
Yeah. Oh, believe me, you won't track these people down. But it's a trucking company, lorry company, and they so she and her brother started this, and it's not going very well. They've been losing money hand over fist, and so there's an interpersonal relationship between her and the brother, but the brother's making unreasonable demands. He's been running the company. 3 of the employees have already quit because of the brother. One of them left in tears. He's now demanding a lot of money. He's basically demanding a good annual salary for only 10 hours a week of work. So I've got to talk to both of them. I spoke to the sister somewhat. I have not heard back from the brother yet, although I know that he knows that this mediation is forthcoming. the interesting twist is that there's a third person in the company, somebody who's been a friend of both the brother and the sister since they were all kids growing up. I did get a chance to have a Zoom chat with him, and the sister had wanted him to participate in the mediation. I didn't think that was a good idea. Unfortunately, neither did he. But he did give me some background that, you know, the brother and the sister were very close, but they just got into it with this company, and that the brother was feeling very put out by the sister's, you know, actions, and you know, and the sister thought that the brother was being over demanding. So that's all I've got so far about this. I've got a meeting with the sister next week, and I've got a meeting with the brother whenever he gets back to me, and then I'll be doing this. Then I'll be mediating this case.
Good for you. Okay. What kind of questions are you wrestling with now, Anthony, in terms of, you know, anticipating what might come up in the mediation or how you would manage it?
Well, that's a very interesting question, because as you may remember, I came from the States where I've been mediating forever, and then I just went through the civil mediation, the civil class and the workplace class I just finished this week. And there's a lot of emphasis in the UK, which we don't have in the States, about, you know, doing the caucus sessions first. So really, I planned during my initial conversation with her privately, I planned to go through basically the first caucus session and ask her some background about, you know, what's the history of the company, what does it mean to you, so I can get some kind of background feel for the context that this is all coming in.
Yeah.
And then I'll proceed down those lines to ask her in private how this is going to, you know, how this is playing out.
Yeah.
I'm only going to have one initial meeting with her, and I know that in the way we were taught, and the British way, which I'm trying to own up to, you have the first caucus and with each party, then you have a second caucus with each party, and in the second caucus with each party is where you start identifying the interests and then burrowing down into those. And I think I may have to do that all in the first caucus session, because I'm only going to get one session with this lady and then one session with the brother. Okay. But I'm looking forward to it, really, because I think that the purpose of this is, there's a lot of interpersonal stuff. They've talked about going to therapy and that stuff, but, you know, the purpose of the mediation is to help them move forward with a forward plan for how they're going to operate this company. That's why they've come to me. And so we'll be working on that, and we'll see how that goes. I can maybe in a month's time, you know, next time we have one of these, I can report back how it went.
I'd love to hear it. And interestingly, thank you very much, Anthony, for that contribution. And interestingly, and this is for everybody else, Anthony's mentioning there about an interpersonal process and then a more civil or commercial process. They are two different models.
Absolutely.
What Anthony's got is, and I'm only smiling because the caucus language, I know it's used more in the USA, but caucus in the UK practice of mediation is more applicable in the civil and commercial setting. In interpersonal mediations, we tend just to talk about private sessions or private meetings or individual meetings. So, you know, again, I'll come back to something I mentioned earlier, which is about the objective of mediation, which is to have a, presumably, you know, a good departure here, something that they can both live with without having to go to court. And when partnerships are set up, particularly within families, quite often people don't write a partnership agreement. So it falls back to a sort of a model agreement that would be considered to be consistent with the legislation, the partnership legislation in this country. So a judge would pull out a model partnership agreement and say, well, had you written an agreement, it would have been speaking this. So that's the you know, the basis for judging what's going on here. So two different models. Interpersonal, we meet separately with each party and then build up to a joint session. With commercial, we have a brief opening chat and then we do separate meetings. We do two separate, or caucuses, as Anthony was referring to. And we do a lot of it shuttle in private meetings with the commercial one, whereas in interpersonal the aim is to get them together across the table for a dialogue together. So the two different models, it doesn't matter if we use elements of each, but it's important to be clear about which one you're using. And in financial contractual issues like this, it's good for them both to have legal advice. So we might even have the solicitors present or available on the day when it's more of a commercial outcome that we're looking at. Quite often, we do disputes with family businesses. It's something that comes up again and again. So often it's to do with the dissolution of a partnership, or a family business could be building, could be plastering, could be could be an electrical firm, and often one of the adult children wants to break away. He or she might want to go and set up on their own, and this can bring up quite a lot of conflict. A, there's no written agreement. B, there's questions around, do they take the clients with them? C, there are things to do with assets. They might be operating out of the family company van or using the family company tools and so on. So these are sort of, interestingly, they're to do with the family dynamics and around the interpersonal relationships amongst the family. But at the same time, it's a commercial issue because there are elements of value that need to be sorted out: tools, vans, client lists. So we're looking at almost a double mediation, interpersonal plus civil and commercial. But thanks very much for that. I think we've probably got time to hear from one more person if we have, or unless we've got a few quick fire things. Tell you what, let's have a few quick fire things. Little questions you might have that would be useful to run past this august group of mediators here. Adriana, hiya.
Hello. I would like to go back to this question of power imbalances and the situation when you said that it can be pretty often. It is pretty often. And the situation when one party that is that has power rejects mediation. So how is there possibility to overcome that situation when the party that you said that it leaves them in a position to be vulnerable, giving up control if they want to accept mediation and be in the mediation? Is there any way to overcome that situation? And maybe is there, if they decide to go to court, is there any role of the court to direct them back to mediation, but to solve that in the mediation when the other party would like to solve that in a mediation?
Well, it kind of raises, it's a good question, Adriana, thank you very much. It kind of raises the issue about mandating mediation. And there's quite a bit of talk about that now, and we're close to the point in UK courts of the mediation being mandatory in some cases. But in my experience, and now mediators' experience, when people are told they've got to be there, they don't participate fully. And somebody's been forced into mediation. And the mandation is the mandating is only to get you to turn up. It's not to make you agree. Nobody can be forced into agreeing anything at all. But ultimately, I suppose the bottom line, Adriana, is that if somebody is not prepared to give up their power, their financial power, physical power, psychological power, coercion, the fact they own the house, if they're not prepared to give that up and come into mediation, then we can't help. And it needs to be something that goes through the courts. And then we lean back on what the law says about how assets should be divided, about people's entitlements to live in a certain place or have certain rights. And if the court then tried to send it back to mediation, I think we would try, obviously, we're mediators, but I think it's very hard if somebody is completely minded not to give up that control, and it is something that needs to be litigated. Ultimately, it would have to go through litigation to see what the law says, and the law is there to right a wrong. And if there is a wrong in the situation, the law intends to put it right. That's what it's for. So sometimes if parties are so reluctant, there's not much point sending it back to mediation in a compulsory way, but it may need to actually go to litigation in the end.
Yeah, I looked at also from the point of, for example, cultural mindset. When you have a situation when people don't understand so much this win-win mentality, and they really are used to going to courts, and they don't want to give up of their power advantage. So it's not a good position for for giving them this option, to accepting this option to try mediation. Yeah,
quite. And we've seen lots and lots of cases where parties will get into mediation, and sometimes they just give up a little bit of power, a little bit of give is often, it can be enough to get some kind of a settlement in mediation. But if they're not prepared to give even that, then mediation is the wrong remedy. Mediation is very powerful. It's universally applicable to all sorts of disputes, but it can't solve everything. And the main reason mediation fails is because the party's reluctance and sometimes having left it too late, so that they're so dug in and they're so invested in the power dynamic that they've set up, where they hold the power, be it finances or property and so on, and they're so invested in it that there's no way they're going to climb down. There's a very intransigent position that they get themselves into.
Yes, though I agree, when there is some kind of domestic violence, that is not indication for going to mediation at all. So.
Correct. That's correct. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adriana. A little comment from Nadine, and then we'll go to Tracy for, I think, probably the last word today. But Nadine's saying, I think it's worth remembering the outcome of mediation is not legally binding. So in a family situation, can take away resources to ultimately achieve child arrangements backed by court order. It's not always about controlling the other person, but setting clear legal parameters. Nice point. It's better to have done the work prior to getting into the court, or to enabling a judge to simply agree a settlement already mediated. Yeah, absolutely. We just had one. We just had one this week, and it was about them wanting to basically get the agreement written down in loose terms, heads of agreement, before it went to court, so that it could then be made into a court order. It was to do with a young person who had been asked to leave the family home for various reasons, but they wanted to basically get their heads of agreement, take it to court, get it made into a binding order. Because mediation agreements, as you rightly say, Nadine, are not inherently legally binding, but we can make them so, either by court order, consent order, or by writing up a contract with some legal advice, which is when we fall down on the civil and commercial side more than the interpersonal side. And somebody just asked, just before I get back to Tracy, just said, can you remind me what was the difference there between interpersonal and commercial? From Alex Christian. So commercial mediation, we do a bit of preparatory work, Alex, so we get some stuff on paper, an agreement to mediate and a position statement. People may be intending to come to mediation with their legal advisors, and the objective is to achieve often a financial settlement or a rewriting of a contract. In interpersonal mediation, it's about a relationship. There's very little preparation and just a brief referral form, and then parties arrive on the day. Commercial, we have a quick roundtable, and then we go into separate rooms, what Anthony was referring to as caucus. Not keen on the term, but and then the mediator will mostly shuttle between the two sides, ultimately coming back together for a joint session at the end of the day. There's a bit more to it than that, but that's very bare bones. Interpersonal, we have individual meetings first with the parties, privately, confidentially hearing about their interests and about their experience of what's gone on and what they want to achieve. And then usually in the afternoon, we'll get the parties together in the interpersonal for a roundtable discussion. So the kind of mirror image. Commercial, we start after initial chat, we start with shuttle, and conclude with a joint session where we write up the agreement. Interpersonal, we start with individual meetings separate, and then we mostly do the work in a joint roundtable session in the afternoon. So they kind of mirror image. And of course, in interpersonal, we don't have representatives there, and interpersonal agreements are only applicable in good faith. They require that the parties want to make them work. They can't be compelled to do so. It's not like writing a contract. Very brief. If you look on our library of webinars, by the way, you'll find stuff on there. There's a showcase about a workplace mediation, how that looks. And as far as I remember, there's a commercial one on there as well. It shows you how civil and commercial mediation works. Okay, over to you, Tracy. Thanks for your patience.
Yeah, I was just going to say something really quick. It's been a great session. It's really got me thinking of how I mediate and maybe what I could offer instead as well. I was just thinking in terms of, I get a lot of people turning up with, power. They are absolutely determined to keep the power. They're hanging on to it. They also turn up angry and they can't let that anger go. And I'm trying to offer something to these two parties that is equal, whereas I can see that one of them needs a hell of a lot more in terms of not mediation, but something that helps them understand their own behavior and why they are, to maybe help them to reflect, to help them to assess their situation, why they're hanging on to this. And I'm just wondering if, and I don't know how this is offered, but whether or not some coaching could be offered before the mediation to help the person see the value of maybe thinking about a possible change of behavior that might be beneficial to them moving forward. So just thinking of, two types of helping intervention.
Definitely. And provided it's offered equally to both sides. Even though you can see that A is the one that really needs it, but offer it to B as well, just in case they both want it. And conflict coaching is a really good adjunct to mediations. And what we've done here quite a lot is after a mediation, and one or both of the parties has come into conflict coaching, because they realize, they take the lid off and they realize, actually, I'm just not very good at dealing with conflict, or I find, I just feel really hurt when somebody gives me feedback or tries to address my behavior, or all sorts of things, which are probably, to do with their own past. But we're not, although I am a psychotherapist, it's particularly in the early days when I started doing this, I had to really sort of tell myself, no, you're not doing therapy here, Mike. This is mediation. It's different. And we're not looking for unraveling people's unfinished business or internal conflicts or things that are hanging over from their upbringing or childhood or previous conflict. We're not doing that. We're looking for a pragmatic, workable agreement. But in order to get that pragmatic, workable agreement, they have to be able to come into a conversation with the other party that is, generally speaking, collaborative and cooperative. And if they don't have the skills or confidence to do that, then perhaps they need this additional support, as you rightly point out, in order to coach them into how to have a conversation. And I don't say that lightly. It must be a really difficult place to be in, where you find it's just so difficult to have conversations with people. And I've become more and more interested in recent years. I was just doing a talk on it at a conference about neurodiversity and conflict, and supporting people who are coming from a more sort of neurodiverse makeup, of having better conversations. I can't open that one up just now because we're just about to finish, but there's a lot to say about that as well. Okay, and just to pick up last couple of comments, everybody. We've got the Workplace Mediation Online Showcase is available to view. The little AI assistant that we get on Zoom now does a transcript summary of this session, by the way. If we can, we'll try and send that to you afterwards, which might answer your point, Alex. You wanted a recap about commercial and interpersonal. So you'll find that there on the AI summary. Usha has said conflict management. I think we were talking about conflict coaching and stuff like that. So how to manage yourself in conflict, I guess, is what you're probably referring to, Usha. Linda's saying that during our mediation session, we have a family therapist sit in the session to contain experiences, interesting, that are triggered. And it looks like I have to enable the AI companion. I'll do that afterwards. Thanks very much, Mike, for that one. Let's just get rid of that. Okay. And especially if we think they're trauma related, says Linda. Yeah, people bring a lot of baggage into mediation. I think I might do a session on this, because we sometimes encounter people who are disproportionately affected by the conflict in front of them, where you look at how much difficulty they're having with the current situation, and it's not quite in proportion to the events that have just happened that have led them to come into the mediation room. It belongs somewhere else. It belongs further away, further back, in a different situation. It's what we call transference, where people transfer into the current situation. They bring in, almost on their shoulders, these other unresolved conflicts or these other ways of interacting which don't belong here. And it's sometimes about disentangling that, given that we're not doing therapy, we're not able to do therapy. They may well be trauma related. People may well get triggered by what's going on, but we've got to draw a line, really. A session about the baggage people bring in would be great, says Nadine. I'll have a think about that. We've got a busy timetable for these events, but yeah, thanks very much for that. It's always interesting to think, well, what could we do next? We're out of time for today, so that's resolution roundtable, which that was really good. Thank you very much for bringing hard stuff along to the resolution roundtable for us all to have a think about. I don't pretend to give you all the answers. It's very useful to hear what's going on in the field, what kind of things people are encountering, and to swap ideas there amongst yourselves, and hopefully get a little bit of benefit of my experience as well. So we're going to quit for now. It's toasty. It's going to be toasty hot when the cloud clears. So okay, keep yourselves safe in these blazing hot days we've got at the moment, and have a great weekend. We'll see you next time for another resolution roundtable. Signing off for now. Thanks ever so much, and good luck. Bye now.